We've heard the president called a socialist, a fascist, a man who went on an apology tour of Europe, a Muslim born in Kenya. And now, thanks to the man who is the face of the Republican Party, you can add disgraced ship's captain to that catalogue of epithets.
In the end, in a few months, this is all going to be ancient history, and we're going to talk about our own little Captain Scatino.
What did you call President Obama?
I called him Captain Scatino, you know, the captain that fled the ship in Italy. That's our own president who's fleeing the American people and not doing his job and running around the country and campaigning.
Here's how the president's spokesman, Jay Carney, responded to that comment just 2 hours ago at the daily White House briefing.
Let me just say that if you are so desperate for attention that you make an analogy that Michael Steele deems inappropriate, you know you've probably gone too far.
And this is how Chairman Priebus responded to the controversy 1 hour ago, doubling down, going so far as casting himself as the aggrieved party.
If people, out there, especially on the Democratic side, want to try to make hay of it, I mean, they're going to be able to do that. The reality is it's a fair analogy. I think it's awful. I mean, people have died, of course. Terrible. And our prayers go out to those people without a question. But to take this comment and turn it into something that it was not, that's wrong, too.
Joining us now is DNC Communications Director Brad Woodhouse. Good afternoon, Brad.
Martin, for having me.
This is about a disaster where the ship's captain has been accused of multiple manslaughter. 17 people are confirmed dead, at least 16 are unaccounted for. And the head of the RNC thinks this is an appropriate analogy to make about the president.
Well, it's incredible. It's disgraceful. As I was watching it, what struck me was not only did he make this inappropriate analogy, he chuckled about it. It was so insensitive towards those families.
Well, I think he was somewhat proud of his skill of analogy in drawing this. I think he was rather pleased with himself.
Well, he must have been, Martin. I mean, forget the disrespect that it shows to the office of the presidency, but just consider how insensitive it is to these families, how insensitive it is to those that still have loved ones missing, those that lost loved ones in that disaster, and to make any suggestion that this president equates with that is just incredibly wrong. And he should apologize. It's incredible that he's doubling down on it. I think Jay Carney had it right. Michael Steele was the most gaffe-prone RNC chairman in history, and if he thought this was inappropriate, then Reince Priebus really crossed the line.
Is this not another example of what we've seen over the period of this presidency? Republicans have questioned the president's place of birth, his personal faith. They shout during his State of the Union speech. They even wag their fingers in his face, as the governor of Arizona did last week. Have they decided that, given their desperation to defeat him, they will say and do anything to this president?
I do think they will say and do anything to get elected. And, Martin, when your party starts with such extreme positions that we'd end Medicare as we know it, we'd round up undocumented workers and kick them out of the country, that we call Mitt Romney calls the DREAM Act a handout, that you double down on tax breaks for the wealthy while the middle class is struggling to get by. When you start with such extreme positions, maybe it's not so surprising that your rhetoric gets extreme when the American people are recoiling at the very things that you stand for.
But, Brad, as you know, many Republicans will be saying something like, well, didn't Democrats attack George Bush in exactly the same way? What's your response to that?
Well, look, I don't remember anything that equates to what from the official Democratic party. I mean, of course, there are interest groups and people will have their say, but I don't remember anything coming from the Democratic Party about George W. Bush being equated to a terrorist or George W. Bush being equated to somebody who's been accused of manslaughter. I don't remember anybody questioning, some of the things about George W. Bush that have been questioned about the president. I don't remember an opposing governor wagging his or her finger in President George W. Bush's face. I mean, the truth is that the Republican Party starts from a core of extreme positions, and it seems that leads to extreme rhetoric when things don't seem to be working out for them with the voters.
How can politicians complain about a lack of civility in public life when they themselves embody such appalling examples of discourtesy and rudeness?
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's hypocrisy at its worst. I mean, one thing that I think that the president had hoped he could do in coming to Washington, one thing he continues to try to do, one thing I think he extended a hand at the State of the Union address is saying, look, we can have tough political battles and we can have tough disagreements, but we can do it. We can do it disagreeably, not with the type of language that we've seen, the type of vitriol. The president doesn't want to engage in that, and frankly, I think we'd all be better off if we didn't engage in that.
Brad Woodhouse at the DNC, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Martin.